Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu Journey to the Chateau.
Bonjour à tous et bienvenue à Journey to the Chateau.
And now English speaking. Hello to everybody to Journey to the Chateau. My name is Patrick.
And I'm Stuart.
And today we are doing a few DIY projects for our future chateau.
For experimenting with plaster casting, I bought this product. It's called Ultracal 30. It's a gypsum cement that is supposed to be a full-strength gypsum plaster product that is specifically for molds. It claims to be up to 50% harder than regular casting plaster and works much like plaster in the mixing, pouring, and the setting. When it's mixed with water, it undergoes a chemical reaction which causes it to harden and then slowly become very hot and very alkaline. This is not a plaster mix to use for making molds that stay in direct contact with your skin, since it can cause severe chemical burns once it heats up and it starts to set. So, the company instructions provide a mix ratio for very large amounts of plaster, but I wanted to make only enough for testing in a small mold. In searching online for other users who had experimented with the plaster powder, they provided a recipe for smaller molds that was using an 8.85 ounce of the plaster powder to 3.35 ounces of water. So for my first test, I decided to give that version a go, mainly because I was too lazy to figure it out mathematically. After the two parts are measured out, the instructions say that you're supposed to sprinkle the plaster into the water and never the other way around. As you near completion, small mounds of plaster are supposed to peak above the surface of the water. When all of the plaster has been added, you should allow the mixture to sit undisturbed while the plaster soaks up the water. The instructions tell you to mix slowly and steadily from the bottom using a side-to-side motion. Stirring in a circular motion may introduce undesirable air bubbles into the mix. The consistency of the final mix should be that of heavy dairy cream. So I have to say that everything was going well until I got to this point of the mixing, and I must have stood here for at least 15 to 20 minutes, and the consistency of this was not changing. Now, if this had not been a controlled experiment, I probably went ahead and just grabbed some of that powder and thrown it in there to thicken it up faster. But since I was doing a controlled test, I decided to continue, so I will fast forward for you. I got to the point where I could tell that it was getting thicker at the bottom of the cup, but it was still really thin at the top. And because it was only telling me to do a side-to-side motion and to not stir it around because of the air bubbles, I found this very frustrating. So I just got to the point where, this was going to be the first test, and I was going to go ahead and pour it into the mold. According to the instructions, the average setup time is supposed to be 25 to 35 minutes when it's manually mixed. I think that I've had to have these sit at least for 5 to 6 hours before they actually got to a point where I could remove them from the mold. So you can see that once the plaster dries in the mold that there is a visual difference. It's much lighter in color. One of the things that I learned from the first test is that the consistency was just too thin. You can tell as the pieces come out of the mold that all of the thin parts are easily breaking off. And one of the other problems was that because you have to sort of flex a silicone mold in order to get pieces out of it, it made it also difficult because these were two large pieces that were together in the same mold. So definitely something to learn from this is that for this specific type of a mold that I need to do the pieces one at a time. The pieces that were in the other mold that did not have the thin detail in them actually turned out really great, and overall I'm really happy with the detail that this plaster has picked up from the molds. So for test number 2, we mainly need to focus on changing the recipe to make it so it works on the thinner detailed mold. Okay, so for test number 2, I gave the ratio that was provided to Patrick, and Patrick came up with some measurements for me. So for this version, we're going with 7.1 ounces of the plaster powder to 2.7 ounces of water. The rest of the mixing process was basically the same as it was in the first test. The only difference is that for the detailed mold, I only filled up one of the forms. And the other difference is that I filled up a different mold first and used the detailed mold second, because what I found was when I started pouring out the plaster that the consistency was changing between the top of the cup and the bottom of the cup, and so I figured I would have the detailed mold filled with the more thicker plaster material from the bottom of the cup to see how much that would make a difference. So after about an hour and a half, these pieces were all ready to come out of the mold, which was already a big improvement over the first test. And overall I was very happy. None of the pieces broke when they came out. The only thing that I would maybe do different for a future test would be to see if I could come up with a recipe that would be for a smaller amount. since I may only be wanting to do one piece at a time, especially with only filling up one part of a mold. And so in order to not waste the product, I'm going to need to try to come up with a smaller version of this same consistency for the recipe. If anyone watching has used this Ultracal 30 plaster product before, and you have any tips or you have your own recipe for making up small amounts at a time, please let us know in the comments below. Next, I'll show you how I created my own silicone mold for using this plaster. But first, let's go see how Patrick is doing with his table restoration.
So this is one of the tilt-top tables, which has some very old woodworm damage, which has been dealt with. So woodworm is dead, yay. And so there was some damage, which I am now attempting to repair. So the first thing to do is use wood hardener, because woodworm is just weakening the structure of the wood. This doesn't even have a lot of damage, but it was enough to make the hinges break after over 300 years. They just got a bit soft after the woodworm damage. Let me show you. So you can see, I hope, this is a little brittle. So I'm going to brush this up with the wood hardener, and then it needs to dry overnight, and then we just go from there tomorrow. So I'm applying the wood hardener on all 4 pieces where it came from and where it needs to be reattached. This will be very much absorbed or completely absorbed by the wood. So then it really seeps into all those little crevices and holes. And after a night of rest and drying, it will be ready tomorrow to be added back to, or glued back to the table with really nice wood glue. Okay, we're going to let that rest till tomorrow. So in order to reattach this, now that it's dry, it has dried overnight, there are many things we can use to make sure this all is very nicely attached. What I'm using today is not regular wood glue, because this has a lot of stress that it needs, because it's a very heavy top tilt top that it has to support. So I'm going to use a special product which has a very high, strong hold, and I'm going to attach this very evenly, at least as even as I can. And I have sometimes a tendency to overdo this a little, so I'm always careful not to put in too much when it's not needed. And then we'll see. Since this was a very clean break, that helps a lot. Sometimes when one has very splintered breaks, that can become a real problem, a nightmare. So then, now that this is set, put the first clamp on and let's go to the next one. Another option to apply the wood glue is with a brush, which I like personally a lot because it really gets it into a lot of the teeny tiny crevices, which then in the end gives quite a bit of strength. We have bought once a beautiful tall case clock, and when it came here from the auction house, and it was years ago, it was in such bad shape. There were a lot of pieces were fallen off, broken off. They were just, it was not the right shipper. So we went at it and restored it, and it looks beautiful. I mean, it's an old clock. It's from the 1700s. So we did not want it to look new, but we wanted to hold itself together. And so we did that before we ever thought about doing anything like this. So hence there is no video from that. Last step again here. Clamp it so it is tight and can bond, and hopefully will be almost as strong as when it was built. Quite. That's the ticket. So in order to get a really nice grip, I've added a couple more clamps, and now we wait. So I have removed the two straps of wooden straps at the bottom, so to see how this looks. The pegs between the boards to hold the tabletop together, make it more stable. There are a few of them that have been they're gone. So that I'm provisionally putting this together. There are screws, modern screws, wood screws that I will use to fill or use on holes that have been empty where the screws were just missing. Once we're over in front, I will replace them with appropriate screws and we will properly restore this tabletop. But for the time being, this is going to just be put together so it can go into storage. So one thing that is now visible, especially in this light, is that this table didn't have just the two straps to stabilize it. There was one going over here and the corresponding one going over here. So eventually we will recreate them and with the appropriate wood stain them and put them in so that the table is actually restored the way it should be restored without touching the surfaces. after it cured, I'm not going to add this back in provisionally so it can be easily transported to anywhere. Again, these are provisionary screws. They'll be replaced later. So here we have the provisionally repaired table, which is now ready to go into storage.
Now that I have the plaster powder figured out, I wanted to work on creating my own silicone mold. The product I used to create the silicone mold is called Pixiss Mold Putty. With this product, you can make custom molds by combining equal parts of A, the white color, with B, the blue color, and then you mix it by hand until it's a uniform color. I had previously purchased 2 carved wood appliques, so I just used a little wood glue to attach them together to make a test ornament for the mold. Once combined, the putty has a 3-minute work time and a 20 to 30 minute demold time. In the 3-minute work time, it is definitely worth it to keep pushing the putty into the object to make sure that it gets into all the nooks and crannies. After 30 minutes, I went ahead and unmolded the object from the silicone. I was very happy and surprised at how well this turned out. You can use this product not only for plaster casting, but this product can also be used for clay, epoxies, resins, wax, soap, and candle making. Now that I successfully have a new mold, it's time to mix up some more of the plaster.
So thank you for watching. Now you can see what we keep our time with to occupy ourselves until we can travel again. In addition to restoring some things we need to restore, we also are putting things in storage, emptying out cabinets. We're in a 5-bedroom house with basically 6,000 square feet. That's almost, what, 600 square meters. It's an obnoxiously large house for 2 people, but they're dogs, so it's not just us.
Right.
So in order to be able to show the house, so nothing can be just horribly stuffed. So we're working on it, and we hope that we go back to France in about 4 to 6 weeks. Right. So fingers crossed. Thanks for watching.
Au revoir.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this video, please use the like feature to let us know. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our Journey to the Chateau YouTube channel if you'd like to see more. Once you've subscribed, you can tap the notification bell in order to ring it, which will allow you to receive all notifications from our channel. Thank you.